Hello, Cooley here. So you've got a Shadow Priest and want to make sure you're the best priest your guild and friends have ever played with? Well, you're in the right place. In this guide, I will go over the basics of Shadow, including stat priorities, talents and glyphs, professions, consumables, and race choices, as well as some advanced macros, tips, and tricks. Let's take a look at the stat priorities for a level 90 priest. As usual, the King of the Hill is Intellect. This directly influences the power of your spells. Hit rating, which as a hybrid class is also derived from Spirit, will affect your chances of missing when casting spells against your targets. Haste will reduce the cast time of your spells, reduce your global cooldown to a minimum of 1 second, and will increase the tick speed of your dots. And at certain levels of haste, you will gain extra ticks on your dots. Crit rating increases the chance to deal double damage, and certain spells require critical strikes to function or activate. Mastery now causes periodic spells to have a chance at dealing their damage twice. This chance is increased the more mastery you have. Here's the priority in which you should stack these stats. Pay attention, because the priority changes depending on how much haste you have access to. The basics of it are quite easy, so don't worry. Simply start by reforging Mastery, then Crit into Haste on every item. On items that already had Haste, reforge the Mastery Crit into Spirit. Next, gem Reckless gems in your red sockets, then switch to Brilliance when you can reach Haste without them. For your yellow sockets, however, you can use pure Haste gems until you're able to reach the Haste soft cap via reforging alone. For blue sockets, you'll be using Energized Wild Jades or Sparkling Rivers Hearts, after which you'll use Intellect Spirit Hybrid Gems for blue sockets and Intellect Haste Hybrid Gems for yellow sockets. Now you may be thinking, wait, aren't you supposed to never use pure secondary stat gems? Well, that used to be the case. However, in MOP, the secondary stat gems have much more rating on them than the primary stat gems. Double, in fact. An Intellect gem, for instance, has 160 Intellect, and a Spirit gem has 320 Spirit rating. Take Intellect as a value of 1, meaning 160 Int gem is worth 160 points. Now take Spirit, being a 60% of the value of Int, or 0.6. This makes the Spirit gem worth the same as 192 Intellect, meaning you just gained 32 pseudo-Intellect, which is what the cool nerds call it. Just remember, you will only use these secondary stat gems until you can reach these caps without them through gear upgrades and enchants. Reason being, reforging trades out secondary stats for other secondary stats. Getting there via gems results in the loss of Intellect. After you reach the cap of 15% for hit, its value drops to 0, and after you reach the soft cap for haste, its value drops to less than half of the value of Int. Let's move on and take a look at the new talent and glyph systems. Unlike the old talent system, this one, while appearing to have less choices, actually offers more versatility. The old talent trees were bloated with talents that gave the illusion of choice, but in fact you would end up taking the same old cookie cutter spec for the entire expansion. Now there are 6 tiers, each with 3 talents per tier. You may only select 1 talent on each tier. The best part of this system is that all the talents are generally good choices. Some will prove stronger in certain situations than others, and you're going to be able to hot swap them at any time, provided you are out of combat and have the proper reagent, which can be purchased from vendors. Glyphs now also function in the same manner. There's no more cast time to swap them either. The cookie cutter aspect of glyphs has been reduced, as most now only provide a utility function or a purely cosmetic effect or ability. Let's go over the talents and some good ways to use them. The first tier is for crowd control. You have Void Tendrils, which is an AoE snare, Psi-Fiend, a targetable AoE fear, and Dominate Mind, which is effectively mind control, but works on more types of enemies. Uses for these in PvE will vary depending on the encounter. See the POV guides for each boss to see any occasions where these might come into play on raid bosses. The next tier is the movement tier. Body and Soul allows you to grant brief movement speed boosts to yourself and your allies, and will likely be the talent you run for the most of the PvE encounters. Angelic Feathers lets you place feathers on the ground that will increase the movement speed of any friendly units that cross over them, consuming them in the process. This will have limited use in PvE, but keep your eyes peeled for opportunities to use it. Phantasm will likely be your talent when you're not using Body and Soul. It allows you to remove movement impairing effects using your Fade spell, and will make you untargetable by ranged attacks and unable to be slowed for 3 seconds after. Next is the damage tier. From Darkness Comes Light, or FDCL, gives Vampiric Touch a 15% chance per tick to proc Surge of Darkness. This proc stacks 2 times and allows you to cast Mind Spike instantly with no mana cost. Mind Spikes cast with this buff will not remove your dots from the target. This talent is a great choice for any fight. It will gain power in low movement multi-target encounters. Mindbender is a new pet that replaces Shadow Fiend. It lasts 3 seconds longer when cast and only has a 1 minute cooldown. It's an excellent choice for single target, or if you're uncomfortable with using the other talents. It's perfect for fights with short burst phases where you need to burn something down quickly. Shadow Word Insanity is an odd little spell that only activates when your target has your Shadow Word Pain active and it has 2 or less ticks remaining. Casting it removes Shadow Word Pain and deals direct damage. The concept of the spell is good, but in reality it does not flow well in the rotation, especially during execute phases. Try it out, however, and become comfortable using it. Tier 4 is dubbed the Healing tier, as the talents you will be using for PvE are healing oriented. First is Desperate Prayer, an instant cast heal with a 2-minute cooldown. This powerful heal will restore 30% of your health. It's off the global cooldown and does not remove Shadow Form. Spectral Guise isn't a heal, but rather a way to avoid damage by going into a stealth form briefly. It will be of limited use in PvE. Bulwark will likely be the talent you run 90% of the time. It's an auto-activating self-shield that absorbs damage equal to 20% of your health. It has a 1.5 minute internal cooldown after activating. It's a nice little fallback when you mess up, and quite helpful to your healers during hard progression. Tier 5 is another damage tier. The first talent is Twist of Fate. This talent grants a 15% damage and healing buff anytime you deal damage or healing to a target below 20% health. The buff lasts 10 seconds and refreshes itself as long as you continue damaging or healing targets below 20% health. This talent is a great all-around choice for any encounter and is very powerful when facing hard execute phases or fights with continuous adds that you must kill, and therefore give yourself a high uptime on this buff. Power Infusion works just like it always has, 20% increased casting speed and 20% reduced mana cost. However, it now lasts 20 seconds instead of 15 and is only castable on yourself. Divine Insight gives Shadow Word Pain a chance to reset the cooldown of Mind Blast and make your next Mind Blast cast within 12 seconds, instant cast with no mana cost. This talent is also very good on movement fights of any kind, and gains strength in multi-boss fights where Twist of Fate wouldn't be useful for the entire fight. Tier 6 provides yet another source of damage. These ones, however, can be a bit tricky to use. Cascade fires a bolt at a target. The bolt will then bounce 3 times, splitting each time to find more targets. It will not hit the same target twice, so it's most useful on fights where there are plenty of adds and they are generally spread in a manner that makes Halo difficult to use. Divine Star fires a star in front of you that travels forward and back, dealing damage to enemies and healing allies in its path. It deals damage and healing on both the outgoing and return trips. Useful for when stacking makes Halo and Cascade bad choices, and when there are multiple enemies stacked or in some form of a line in front of you. Halo fires a ring that deals damage and healing for 30 yards in every direction around you. Damage increases as it travels, with the max at 25 yards. This is the only level 90 talent that is a single target DPS increase, but only if you can position appropriately to use it. Having a range display add-on will greatly help in maximizing this talent. Glyphs won't make or break what you do in most situations, so choose the ones you find most valuable, personally. When I find glyphs especially useful for a specific encounter, I'll let you know in the POV video for that fight. As far as professions go, there isn't really a wrong choice as long as you're choosing non-gathering professions. They all provide the same 320 intellect value. Some will be better for earlier stages of gearing than others, but for the most part you can pick the ones you enjoy the most and not have to worry about losing out on potential damage. As for consumables, well, first things first, flasks. Flask of the Warm Sun will be your flask of choice for this expansion. It provides 1000 glorious intellect. As for food, you'll be looking for the Mogu fish stew. This is the food you're going to want to eat for the hard stuff when you're trying to beat your guildies in DPS or take down a difficult boss. It provides 300 intellect. Eating a feast will give you 275 int, and in most cases this will be good enough as it won't result in much noticeable damage lost. Eat these when doing easy content and make sure you have the good stuff for kill attempts on progression and when trying to do the most damage as possible. Your potion for this expansion will be the Potion of the Jade Serpent. This bad boy gives 4000 intellect. So good. Here are the most optimal races to choose from for a priest. Panda will be a great choice for either Alliance or Horde factions. Their racial bonus of double food buff is powerful. If choosing Panda though, you will always need to be fed to get the bonus. If you die and get rezzed or forget to eat, it's useless. And if you do not always eat the powerful personal food, you'll be losing out on at least 50 intellect. Trolls are going to continue to be a powerful choice for Horde Shadow Priests. With their berserking talent, a well-played Troll Shadow Priest can easily make up for the loss of consistent, always there stats of the other races, and even wipe the floor with them using well-timed, stacked cooldowns. Great for everything, most useful on fights with serious burst requirements during certain phases. Goblin Priests gain 1% cast speed increase, which can make hitting the haste caps in early gear easier. Their rocket jump is also a great way to increase DPS by minimizing movement. Undead have recently joined the ranks as a viable PvE race with their new Touch of the Grave ability that gives your spells a chance to proc Touch of the Grave, dealing damage to your targets and healing the caster. No assembly required, just jump in and go. Your racial does everything all by itself. As for the Alliance, the Worgen remain a solid choice with their sprint ability and their 1% crit. Crit has greatly gained value in this expansion, and their racial is worth 600 crit rating. A solid choice. Draenei still gain their 1% hit as before, and this makes it easier to get to the hit cap. Humans give 3% spirit, which slightly increases their hit. We also gain 1% hit through the new expertise to spell hit conversion added in MoP. This 1% expertise, however, only functions when using a mace. While there are other races that can beat priests, these are the only ones that you should consider as a serious PvE player looking to maximize your potential. Now let's go over the DPS rotation and its subtle variances when using different talents. The shadow rotation is pretty simple, and you just need to follow an easy priority system, as with most classes. Just before the pull, you should pre-pot and begin casting Mind Blast as your tank is running in. Get your Vampiric Touch and Shadow Retain up, then cast your Shadow Fiend or Mindbender. If talented into Halo and at the appropriate range, you should then cast Halo. You can use the time it takes to cast Shadow Retain and Shadow Fiend on the pull to move into optimal position for Halo. After opening, follow the priority of using Devouring Plague whenever you have 3 Shadow Orbs, and only when you have 3 Shadow Orbs. Mind Blast on cooldown. Shadow Word Death on cooldown if the target is under 20% health. Keep Shadow Word Pain up, keep Vampiric Touch up, keep Shadow Fiend or Mindbender on cooldown. Cast Halo if talented and at the optimal range of around 25 yards. Notice how I have a range display above my minimap that turns green when I am in optimal range for Halo. Next, use Mind Spike procs if you have them. And then use Mind Flay when none of the other spells are available or in need of refreshing. In the clip you're watching now, I'm spec'd into From Darkness Comes Light. If you watch this video, you'll notice as I move around in the fight that I use my FDCL procs as well as other instant cast abilities to avoid losing damage while moving. Any instant cast abilities are a great way to fill your globals while moving. When you don't have any procs to use such as Mind Spike, Divine Insight, and no cooldowns like Shadow Fiend, what you're going to want to do is spam Shadow Word Pain until you get to a point where you no longer need to move, at which point you'll go back to your normal rotation. Shadow Word Pain now has an instant damage upon use, which makes it act kind of like the old Devouring Plague did, where you can spam it while moving for a decent sustained damage. Now in this clip I've spec'd into Shadow Word Insanity and Divine Insight, so you can get a look at some of the capabilities of these talents, get a little feel for the rotation before stepping into it yourself perhaps. One of the easiest ways to increase your damage as a Shadow Priest is to have good cast bar and dot timer add-ons. I know there are some people out there that don't like add-ons, they think they're a crutch. Yes, I did air quotes while saying that. But the fact of the matter is, if you're playing a Shadow Priest without at least dot timers and a cast bar add-on, you're honestly gimping yourself. Now, the damage isn't generally going to be high, as in like 50% less than someone with the add-ons if you're good at playing the Shadow Priest, but when it comes down to min-maxing, you are going to be losing out. The reason being is playing a dot class and using channeled spells, you have to keep your eye on things like ticks. When you're channeling a spell, your Mind Flay, for instance, it has points where it ticks and deals its damage. Mind Flay being your lowest priority spell, there will be often times when you're going to want to cancel it in order to cast a higher priority spell. Now if you can cancel at the appropriate points just after it's dealt its damage, instead of just before for instance, you can buy yourself a little extra damage throughout the course of the fight. Like I said, nothing that's going to be wildly noticeable, but it will make a difference. Same with your dots. You want to be able to refresh them perfectly without losing cast time or losing uptime. And for that, you're going to want a good cast bar and dot timers add-ons. I recommend personally using Gnosis. Well guys, enjoy your Shadow Priest and Mop. I know I will be. And make sure to check out my Shadow POV boss guides for more tips on how to use your new talents and glyphs to the max potential.